Hi Mr. Miskew, this is Arthur Wu, and today this video is basically going to talk about giving you a brief idea of how this assignment 1, the world map quiz, is going to run. And I'm going to talk about the parts that I'm in charge of. Suhair is going to talk about his, but basically I'm just going to run through the program to give you an idea of what I've done and also kind of my problem solving process. So firstly, as you can see, all the variables are encapsulated, and some of these variables are created for the home screen itself, the visual looks of it, and some of those are for the logistics, for example, to figure out the high score, to store the values, to store the scores of the players into array lists, etc., etc. So I'm going to elaborate on that later on. So as you can see, I also applied a lot of my part. It's mostly applying what I've done in class, which is concepts like reading from a file, writing in a file, creating an array list, and also using equals method, toString methods, etc., and apply it to this kind of a complex game. So firstly is the action listener. When we go in, and there will be basically the home screen, there will be 3 different buttons. Yep, so when we click on, so basically my part is to fill in the code of what exactly is going to happen if I click these 3 different buttons. So firstly, let's start with if I click start. So that's basically a new player, which very first time start a game. So what we have to do is we have to create a file for that particular player, so that in future, if he returns and plays it again, his record and the score that he obtained will be stored in a particular file, which we can record and figure out the high score later on. So firstly, another thing that I did is not only that the file name would contain the name of the player, but also a random ID, so that just in case there will be 2 people with kind of like the same name, then we can still use the ID to differentiate one person from another. So the program starts off with asking the player's name, who his or her teacher is. We're gonna assign him an ID, and basically the next step of this program is really to so basically the next step of the program is we're gonna in here see a toString method is used. So what it basically do is it takes the input of the random ID that is generated, and then it is going to print out the dialog that is shown right here. So in this case, as we run the program, after you insert your name and your teacher's name, then it's going to show up a message that tells you to remember what your player ID is. And at the same time, after this message, basically what we do is create a new file for this player. And we will also start using file writer and print writer in order to print the student name and the teacher name into the file for our future references. And one thing to bear in mind is the print writer has to be turned off before we proceed to other codes. So the reason why you see an error in screen random is because the moment this video is created, I still haven't merged the program with Suhair yet, and that is why Suhair is going to elaborate the screen random object, and that's basically where the multiple choice questions and where the map quiz actually takes place. So basically what happens after the game is the particular player will get a score, and this score we're going to store it back to the file. So that is why we start the print writer again, and we store the score into the file, and then we turn off the print writer. So that's basically it for if you're a new player and you click and start a button. click the start button. And then now I'm going to explain returning player. So how returning player is going to work, it's basically the button name for returning player is start2. And what we're going to do is we're going to again ask the player for his or her player ID, because we need that information to get access to the file. We also need the player's name to get access to the file. And what you see in here is something that I use in order to incorporate the equals method in this program, which I created two new check1 objects. So so here's the class for check1, and here is basically one of the only field basically for check1, which is string check. And here's the constructor as you see, and I'm going to set up the field of check1 in here, and there's also the get and set method for check, and there's also finally the equals method that I'm going to elaborate later on. So how does this code work is basically I take the input of the player ID and the person's name, and I try to read into his particular file. So if the player insert all his information correctly, then you will see that as I check in here, so that means the file exists. So if he puts in the correct information, the file exists, then we can proceed by sending the player a message, we found you, and then again we'll open up the file writer, the print writer, so that later on for our future setup to put in the score in the same file of the player. And again, screen random shows as an error because our program it's not merged yet. So now it comes back to how the C1 and C2 comes into play, because just in case if the file doesn't exist or the player has inserted wrong information, what it's going to do is the try and catch structure will trace not only trace the error according to this code, it will also turn C1 into true. So initially we have C1, it's with a field check, it's false, and C2 with a field check with the string true. So if we turn C1 into true at the same time, and in this case the while loop will be true because the amount of fields are the same, the type of the fields are the same, the type of object is the same, and eventually the string that is stored in that particular field are the same, because both of them will be true if it enters this particular catch loop. So if this instance is true, that means the player has inserted wrong information, and that's why we use a do while loop to ensure that the program goes back to the original place, which will again ask the player for the correct player ID and also his name. So that's pretty much it for the returning button. And then finally is the high score button. So I would say high score button, it's definitely one of the most challenging and kind of requires more thinking behind, because it really depends on the transition from the player's file into an array list to figure out the high score. So I'm going to elaborate on that right now. So basically, again, in order to check the high score, you cannot be a new player. You have to be like a returning player. So again, we'll ask for, just like returning player button, we'll ask for your player ID, we'll ask for your name. The C1, C2 check mechanism still applies. So if a person has typed wrong information, we'll track the error, and we'll also use the do while loop structure in order to go back to the original question, and hopefully the player will eventually insert the right information. So assuming that they inserted the right information, we are again going to create a file. We're going to search for the file of that particular player using basically a scanner object. And what we're going to do is we will take the scanner dot next line, which will track the very first line of the file, which as we mentioned just now is the name of the student. And then we're going to use the second line, which is the teacher's name, and store it as T. So as you see later on, N and T is going to be included as the fields of the object, so that's why we store the values of N and T. And also for we also going to use, this is the important part, is using a while loop to capture the rest of the contents in the file, which is basically the scores, all the scores that a player has achieved within his own file, within his ID and his name. So what we're going to do is, because we already set up a really nice array list p-score with with the expectation of storing integers in it, what we're going to do is basically, while scanner objects scan that there are still integers within the file, we're going to add these integers one by one into the array list. So as soon as we finish adding all the array list, we're going to basically construct the new player object for this particular player who wants to check his high score, and we'll obtain his name, his teacher's name, as well as the p-score array list. So after that, after this process is done, after we basically convert the numerical values, extract the numerical values from the file to the array list, we're going to print out a message which shows that saying, congratulations, your high score is x dot f high p score. So how does this particular method work? We have to refer back to basically the play object, which I'm going to show you right now. So as you can see, the player has three different parameters: a student's name, teacher's name, as well as the new array list. And here's the constructor, and there's also get set methods for array list, student name, and teacher's name. So what I want to focus on right here is basically the high score, how to keep track of the high score. So as you see in the home screen method, what we do is we have the implied object x and then dot, which allows it to execute f high, and we also take p-score as the parameter to do so. So imagine we have the p-score array list, which contains all the numerical values of the score for a particular player. What we can do is basically using a for loop to scan through each of the elements in the array list to compare which one it's the maximum number, which one is the largest score, and then eventually we're going to return the maximum score. So that is why as soon as we return the maximum score and we incorporate that into the show message dialog, then the player, by inserting his ID and his name, will easily be able to keep track of his high score, and hopefully he will do better next time in the game. So in conclusion, I really appreciate the opportunity that this assignment gave me to really utilize basically pretty much all the concepts that is covered this year in grade 12 computer science term 1. And I'm also happy by the fact that the high score mechanism eventually worked, and I'm also glad that I was able to kind of with the assistance of Mr. Miskew, I'm able to go through using the scanner object properly and setting up the names of the file properly, so I can get access to the values, and also basically to complete the process of figuring out the high score for a particular player. Thank you very much.